Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. Today I'm going to share with you what not to do when you start homeschooling. I have a whole series on how to get started homeschooling here on YouTube, but I thought that it would also be helpful to share some things about what not to do when you start homeschooling, because a lot of times these are the things that we completely forget about. So I have 10 things that I'm going to quickly share with you, and I hope that you will get something out of this if you are new to this journey. So, the first thing that you should not do is skip the deschooling process. I know that a lot of people have never even heard of deschooling, but this is such an important facet, and I wish I would have done it when I started homeschooling because it would have saved me a world of trouble, including sending my children back to school for 2 years because I burned out. So, what is deschooling? Deschooling is living as if school didn't exist. That's basically it. It means allowing your children to kind of detox from the school environment if you are taking them out of school, or if you as a parent are first deciding that you are going to homeschool, or even if you're also one of those parents who is taking your children out. Sometimes you yourself need to detox from school. We grow up with this notion of what education is supposed to look like, and we tend to think that it is only supposed to look the way that it is done in school, when that is absolutely very, very far from the truth. Deschooling allows your child, if let's just talk about the child first. Deschooling allows your child to just get used to being home, and this is especially helpful if they have been in school for a while. It gives them time to relax, maybe just de-stress, because yes, schooling is stressful, it's overstimulating, and it's even boring. So deschooling does allow your child to do things that they want to do. It gives them time to do things that they enjoy, and that is exactly what they should be doing. When you are deschooling, you should have no academic expectations for your child at all. Now, I just want to add the caveat that there is learning to be found in everything. And the way that you see education as only happening in a school is completely incorrect. And you will learn that through the deschooling process. So trust me, don't give your child any academic expectations during this time. Just allow them to really simmer in the time that they are spending at home with you. As for you, the parent, deschooling is a time for you to look into the different philosophies of homeschooling. Read about education and how children really learn. And I would suggest not reading books about education that are written by people who have it geared towards the schools, because that is not what homeschooling needs to look like. That is really important. This also gives you the time to observe your child, see what it is that they like to do. How do they like to learn? What do they gravitate towards? What interests do they have? And it also allows you to see that your child is learning even when you think that they might not be. Sometimes your child might be just lying down on the sofa and you think that they're doing nothing, but you'd never know what is going through their minds. Very often, even as an adult, I know that it is when I look the most lazy, I'll just say it, when it looks like I'm just being lazy, very often those wheels are turning in my head and I am thinking and thinking and problem solving. And the same really happens to children as well. How many of you have suddenly woken up in the middle of the night because you've solved a complicated problem in your head? Am I the only one that happens to? But yes, that happens to children too. Give yourself time to deschool. Now, how long you deschool really depends on how long you're comfortable with. Some people say that you should deschool for 1 week for every year that your child was in school. So, for example, if they were in school for 4 years, maybe kindergarten, first, second, third grade, then you should give them 4 weeks to deschool, just 4 weeks to just detox from the school environment. Other people believe that for every year your child has spent in school, you should give them a full year to deschool for that. But to be quite honest with you, I think that a lot of people are not going to be comfortable with that. Sorry, not a year, a month to give them, yeah, because I'm thinking that wouldn't make sense. A month. So for every 4 years that your child spent in school, some people recommend a full month for you to deschool for that time. And so if you're pulling a child out in high school, I know that a lot of parents wouldn't feel comfortable, allowing their kids to just what we would consider doing nothing, but that is actually not doing nothing for like 10, 11 months. It's really up to you. But again, I just want to remind you that just because you are not giving them schoolwork during this time doesn't mean that there is nothing going on in their head. If your child is awake, he is learning. So, the second thing that you should not do is purchase schoolish textbooks right off the bat. I know when I very first started looking into homeschooling, the first thing I did was Google homeschool curriculum, and I went right to the textbooks. And thankfully, I did not start homeschooling at that point in time because I didn't think that I would be able to homeschool 6 children. And when I did start homeschooling, I already had 7. So that's another story completely. But that is really the first thing that I did. And that's what a lot of people do, because when you think school, you think textbooks. And it doesn't have to be that way. If you've taken the time to deschool and you know how your child likes to learn and what it is that they like to learn about, and if you have read about different homeschooling methods, you will know that textbooks are not always necessary. And in fact, it is really a small percentage of children who learn best from textbooks. There are so many different ways for your children to learn from. And a lot of times we kind of just order the textbooks by default, but that needn't be. So if you took that time to deschool, you will know what I'm talking about. If you are deciding right now what curriculum you're going to take or what curriculum you want to buy, and you're thinking, okay, what is she talking about? Now is the time to take a breather, step back, and yes, look into the unit study method. Look into unschooling. Look into the classical method, Montessori, Charlotte Mason. In fact, you could actually homeschool without any textbooks. We don't use any textbooks in our homeschool at all. We use a workbook for language arts. We use a math program, an online math program for math. But everything else is pretty much done with library books and sometimes unit studies. So yes, you can homeschool pretty much just with library books. Do you know how inexpensive that is? So when you hear people telling you how expensive it is to buy curriculum, no, that doesn't have to be the case. You can homeschool pretty much with all library books, except for math. I would say that a lot of times you do have to add in some sort of math program, but really don't think of textbooks as being your only option. You can. If you decide in the end that your child will learn best with textbooks, then by all means do that, but don't do it just because you feel like you have to do it because that's the way that it's always been done. Because trust me, it hasn't always been done that way. Homeschooling has been around longer than school, and I want you to remember that. The third thing that you should not do is think of yourself as a school teacher. This is a huge mistake that I made. I loved school. I really did. I just loved learning. I loved getting that pat on the back for doing well. I loved getting those little star stickers. So when I started homeschooling, I felt at first like I was playing school with my own children, except this was like for real. So when I started, I had a classroom in the front of my house, and I had a big chalkboard that I bought at a teacher supply store. I had educational posters all over the walls. I had little individual school desks that I bought at a thrift store, and they were actually old school desks, the kind that they could put things inside of. I had those. I had little rows of those, and I used to stand in front of my children while they were seated at their desks, lecturing them like a teacher does. I would even have them raising their hands to ask to go to the bathroom or to ask me a question. Yes, I was that bad. And I can tell you that nothing is going to damage your relationship during a homeschool period more than if you are spending so much time trying to be a teacher that you are forgetting to be a parent first. So the fourth thing that you should not do when you start homeschooling is to automatically try to mimic school. Because let's face it, if your child's school career was working correctly, you would have them in there, wouldn't you? As we can see, at least in the United States, the school system is not working. So why would we try to recreate that? So often you hear people saying that parents should not be homeschooling their children because they're not educated enough to homeschool their children. Well, why aren't they educated enough? Haven't most parents been through the public school system? Yes, they have. So when you try to make that argument against homeschooling, you're actually making an even greater argument for homeschooling. Because why should parents send their children into the same institution that failed to educate them? I also have to say that you do not have to take 6 to 7 hours a day to homeschool your children. It takes far longer to get school done in a traditional school setting because there are so many distractions, changing of classes, waiting for different children to get done with their assignments, taking roll call, morning announcements, disciplinary actions. The list goes on and on and on. And I actually read a blog post once, I wish I could find it, where it was a former school teacher, and they broke down the amount of time that's actually spent in school really learning, like doing actual work, and it was like less than an hour. So even though they're in school all that time, it doesn't mean that they're learning all that time. So you do not need to be homeschooling for 6 to 7 hours a day. Today, I got done homeschooling my 6 children. Now I have to say structured learning, because my children do a lot of self-directed learning by themselves that I am not involved in. But the part that I was involved in today for my 6 children took me 2.5 hours for 6 children. So just really keep that in mind. And you can also homeschool any time of the day. You don't have to follow the school schedule for that either. You don't have to start school at 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning. We used to start school at 12 o'clock p.m. Now we've been starting at 10 o'clock a.m. There are some people who don't start homeschooling until 5 o'clock in the evening. It doesn't matter. It is up to you as the parent, and that is one of the greatest things, is the flexibility. You can even choose to homeschool like 3 days out of the week and on the weekend if you'd like. Anything. It is completely up to you. So, the fifth thing not to do when you start homeschooling is to forget to explore the world around you. Sometimes when you first start homeschooling, and sometimes even veteran homeschoolers get this way sometimes, you just get really anxious and you feel like you might be doing your child a disservice, and you find yourself gravitating more and more and more to giving them extra work, to making sure that you are giving them everything that they need, because you don't want them to have any learning gaps, which I'm going to tell you right now that everyone has learning gaps. Whether they are in public school, private school, or homeschooling, there are always going to be homeschooling gaps. Not homeschooling gaps, learning gaps, because there's no way that any one person can have all the knowledge of the universe in their laps. I just want you to remember that. But if you are spending so much time just giving your child so much work, you're going to forget where the best education of all comes from: the world. Look at the world around you. Take advantage of that. Look for programs in your neighborhood. It doesn't even have to be programs. Just go outside. We live by some canals. We live by lots of trails. We live by the Appalachian Trail. We live in a really fantastic area. And if you actually really, a lot of people don't pay attention to where they live. I know people who have been living in my neighborhood since their childhoods, and they're adults now, and they have never gone on the trails around here. Yet I've been living here for 3.5 years, and I'm there all the time. And I think that's something that you can see when you have new eyes, when you're in a new place. So really, don't forget about looking into your community. Really don't take it for granted. So you can go to the creek, go to the river, take your children to the playground, go to museums. Lots of museums have free days to get in. I know that the art museum close to our house, well, not that close, like 30 minutes away, has free days on Sundays for you to get in. The world around you it's a better learning experience than any textbook can give you. This even includes the grocery store, the bank. And it doesn't even have to be out of the house. It could also be in your house, cooking with your children. My 13-year-old made bread with me the other day. My 9-year-old learned how to make omelets the other day. These are skills that are necessary in real life, and these are the skills that are going to stick with them because they have more meaning for them very often than finding out about the life cycle of a butterfly. The next thing that you should never do when you first start homeschooling is to try to please everyone else. When you tell people that you're homeschooling, you're going to get lots of opinions. And the last thing that you want to do is try to please everyone else. Everyone will tell you what it is that your children should be learning when you're homeschooling. Or they will tell you what their children are doing in school, or what their neighbors down the street are doing, or what this other homeschooling family that they know is doing. Do not try to please everybody else. Every homeschool looks different because every family is different. And I know that people mean well, but you know your family more than anyone else. So don't try to please other people, because it's not going to get you anywhere. So the next thing is, and it's kind of tied to that, is don't allow people to undermine your decision to homeschool. There are a lot of naysayers out there that will tell you this, and this are wrong with homeschooling, yet they fail to see the forest for the trees. Don't listen to them. You have made this decision for yourself. It was your decision. It was not their decision. And you had very good reasons for making this decision. And just as you would never walk into someone's life and start giving them parenting advice that was unsolicited, at least I would hope that you would not do that. You don't have to listen to people who have bad things to say about homeschooling, because I guarantee you that 99% of the time, they have absolutely no direct knowledge of homeschooling at all. Most of the time, they have never homeschooled themselves, or they have never known anybody who homeschooled, or they might have just heard some horror stories. They might have read something in the newspaper, or they might have heard from, well, take it from Ferris Bueller, my best friend's sister's boyfriend's brother's girlfriend. I heard it from them that homeschooling is bad. That is really where you will usually get stories about how bad homeschooling is. Don't take it to heart. This is your decision and no one else's. So the next thing that you should not do when you start homeschooling is you should not neglect to get your child's perspective. And this really goes back to your child having their own interests. And so ask your child, what would you like to learn about? How do you like to learn? Do you like to draw? Do you think that you would like to do this? If you have a child who doesn't like to do crafts, like I have one son, actually I have two. And they both are such perfectionists that they would just cry every time that I would try to get them to do a craft. And you know what? Crafting isn't necessary in a homeschool. If your child does not like crafting, then they don't have to do crafting. So just keep that in mind. Get their perspective, get their opinion, and then sit down and say to them, do you think that you would like this? Now, I do want to add that there are some times that your kids will have to learn things that they really don't want to learn, but it's important for them to know. And I get that. So when it comes to those times, yes, you need to step in and you need to do what's best for your child, because they are children. But as much as you can, do ask them for their opinion. And I think that they will appreciate that, and they will also retain more of the information that they are taking in. Going along with that is don't forget, or no, you should not neglect your own preferences. So just as I'm telling you to ask your child for their preferences, I want you to remember that you, as the homeschool facilitator, you're going to be the one that is going to be carrying these things out. So if you choose activities or a curriculum or art projects that you yourself are cringing at, you're not going to have a good time homeschooling. You need to take yourself into account too. So if it's you that don't like crafting, really keep that in mind. You might have a child that likes to craft and then you don't. And so that's when it might come time to maybe send your child to an art class, or sometimes you could find a happy medium, something that's not too involved or messy that you would enjoy doing with them, or maybe even something that they could do by themselves. You can always find ways to get around the things that you don't enjoy, but don't invest yourself in something that you know you're not going to like, because your child will pick that up and it will take that away. It'll take a lot of motivation away from their learning. And so the last thing that you should never do when you start homeschooling is to doubt yourself. And yeah, I get it. It's a huge step. And in our society, it's the norm. It's the norm. My kids always make fun of me when I say the norm, but I say it a lot. It's the norm for us to send our children to school to be educated by other people. So yes, you will look different from the world around you, although there are way more people homeschooling now than there used to be. But you made this decision for your child. You made this decision for yourself. You made this decision for your family. And I want you to remember that the saying, the grass is always greener on the other side. There are always going to be days when you think that someone else could be doing a better job educating your children, or that you just aren't doing a good enough job with them. And let me just reassure you that just as you were your child's first teacher from the moment they were born, you can continue to be your child's best teacher in your homeschool. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.